Welcome to the Low Demand Parenting Podcast, where we drop the pressure, find the joy, and thrive, even when it feels like life is stuck on level 12 hard. I'm Amanda Diekman, author, autistic adult, and mom of 3. I'm not here as an expert, but a fellow traveler. Together, we're learning how to live more gently, authentically, and vibrantly in this wild parenting life. In today's episode, I'm talking to Carolina Ramirez. Carolina is a spiritual therapist, a coach, and a guide for women and mothers to do inner healing and connect with their truth. She's especially interested in working with Latina women and women of color in reclaiming their power, breaking intergenerational cycles, and mothering ourselves and our children with intention. I know many of you will recognize your own stories in this podcast. I felt really witnessed and inspired. And while we're talking about this deep work, I do want to flag for you guys that my next round of the Restore Your Soul Mastermind is opening up for enrollment. This mastermind is for all of you who are feeling burned out and crispy, like this parenting gig is taking everything you've got and more, and you're wondering, what about me? What about my needs? What about the deep rumblings inside of me? And it's called Restore Your Soul for a reason. We're going to go deep into what makes you feel truly alive and connected and vibrant in this world, which to me is soul work. So come on in if you are a soul-led person who is open to the wider spiritual world and looking for fellow travelers on the journey. It's a 6-month intensive where we meet regularly. The group dynamic is a big part of it. And we have a virtual retreat where you get to have a weekend off right in your own town to do some of this beautiful self-nurture and self-healing. I love leading these groups, and I wonder if you might like to be a part of it. There's more information in the show notes, and so would love to have you. All right, let's get into my conversation with Carolina.
Thank you, Amanda, for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
I am really eager to hear a bit more about your journey, specifically your parenting journey. You've said before that there was an earlier time when you were looking at a hard parenting road, but your primary question was, how do I fix this? Then you had a pivot where you began asking, how is this affecting me? And what are my expectations of myself and my child? And I want to go back to that point because so many parents find themselves stuck in the how do I fix this mode. Can you share more about what was happening in your journey that led you to that pivot point?
I think what was going on for me was there was this dissonance of the information that I knew about autism and ADHD. And so coming from where I came from, trained as a therapist, I've worked with children that had autism, and a lot of these children were on the severe side. We don't want to label it like that, but had more complications with their autism. And so when I was told that my son was autistic, the picture that I saw of the life that he was going to live was a picture of doom. I hate to say that, but that is the picture that came to me because of what we've seen in the movies, in the TV media, what's portrayed heavily sometimes. And so it was very fear-based. Now I know that my assumptions of life with autism were based on these fears that were imposed on us. And so I was crippled by that fear of the unknown and just really grieving that my child would be suffering, because that's the idea that I had, that autism equated to suffering. And so I started with the best intentions, like all of us parents do, took guidance from the experts that did the best that they could at the time to try to guide me down the path of helping him through the challenges that we were having with him. So really dove into like therapies heavily, just really over functioning in that way, and got to a point where I just depleted myself. And the results really just they weren't good. My son was still having a lot of meltdowns. He was still having a really difficult time regulating himself. And so it came to a point where I started to question, why am I even doing all of this? And I am burning out because I'm doing all the things that I've been told to do, and it doesn't really seem to be helping. And so that's when I had to really get honest with myself and had this big aha moment that maybe the experts weren't right, and that I was looking at this from a very deficit angle, whereas we were looking at imposing things on my child that he didn't necessarily need. And what he needed was the complete opposite, was for us to just trust that he was having a hard time, and that by doing more, we were actually stressing him out more. And so when I saw that the behaviors weren't changing and that I was doing all the things by the book, I said, something's got to change. And I am not being a good parent to him because I was exhausted, I was depleted, I was burnt out. I was reverting back to ways that I was raised, where I always swore that I would never do. And so that really got me. It was like an awakening for me. And I was able to realize, like, I have to follow my intuition. And my intuition was always telling me, this is not the way.
Absolutely. People ask me about what does a high demand Amanda look like? And I think it's a very similar part of my journey when I layered demands on my kids because the world was putting all those demands on me and telling me this is what good parenting looks like in this situation. This is what these kids need. And otherwise, like you said, it's all fear. Otherwise, if you don't do everything, then the future is bleak. What difference does it make to shift from this kind of fixing mode to the curious inward journey that you are now such a potent leader of? How does that help parents who are in really challenging situations?
I feel like it helps us to be more empowered. I think that when we start to lean in with a more curious lens and to really trust ourselves that what we know to be true, that is actually going to help our children, is what we need to be following, the path that we need to be following. And when you realize that you pretty much have those answers, even though it may not look like what the experts told you, and you realize that you're literally attuning to your child, because I always tell this to any moms or parents that I've worked with, like, you are the true expert of your child. That child, I have a very spiritual lens on my work, and I believe truly that whether our child are our biological children or even adopted children, that they came into our lives for a reason. We have this connection with them, and our job is to really work on that connection with them as much as possible. And so attuning to their needs is what really helped me to really see that, wow, when I drop the demands, when I just sit there and I'm with him, when I'm not pushing my own agenda or my control over what he should or shouldn't do, that he actually is better. He's thriving. He's not necessarily doing all of the things that society wants him to do, but he's happier and he's calmer. And I can actually see his true essence, right? Of who he is. And he came here with a mission. I always say this, he's my greatest teacher. And I am so grateful to him. We need to learn that process of surrendering to the lessons and to really opening ourselves up to live more authentically versus the life that we thought we were supposed to be living.
It totally comes out of those earliest messages that we got about either what's wrong that we need to fix or what's the good life that we're supposed to be stretching for. You talk about the intuition that can rise up at those moments, this kind of inner guide that I think particularly helps mothers recover their sense of intuition
I'm curious what you think makes us disconnect from our intuition. And even in your own journey, what were some of those early messages that told you not to listen to your intuition? And what steps can we take to recover it?
I do feel that the early messages that we received from our childhood and our experiences in our childhood were based on the world we were living in, the type of family that we came from. And for me personally, I come from an immigrant family. And so the values that were placed on success for me was this overachiever, perfect child. And so I think also because there was a lot of trauma growing up when I was younger, I always wanted to be this perfect person so that I don't have to deal with all the messiness that comes with a chaotic home and trauma. So there was this internal factor too. So there's the outside things that are going on that are impacting you. So like the way that your parents speak to you. So we weren't allowed to speak about our emotions. There was really no emotional nurturing that was going on. And I understand that my parents were dealing with trying to keep food on the table, working multiple jobs just to make sure that ends meet and that we had food and clothes and a place to live. And that was not in addition to all the other chaos and trauma that they had within themselves or between the two of them that then affected their children. And so for me, there was a lot of unconscious and subconscious things that I put into my own mind. And this is what happens when we're children. We just think, okay, in order for me to be less of a problem, I'm going to be the perfect child. And in my situation, that was really the only way that I saw out of my current environment. My environment was filled with a lot of poverty, filled with a lot of abuse and drugs and things that were not really good for children to be around. And so I made it my point to be this productive person. And I think when I did that, I lost a sense of who I was really supposed to just be. And so we forget that the most important thing is just being. And so when we get these messages from so many different things and places, so it's not just our parents, not just our upbringing, but society and ableism. Who do we say has most value in this society? It's those people that are like the most productive, quote unquote. And so there's this internal dialogue that we have to be a certain way in order to be valuable and in order to just be. And so that process disconnects us from our intuition and from our soul.
What did it look like when you were first getting a sense of who am I while you're parenting? I think that's what's so challenging is that we're doing this deep inner work at the same time as we're parenting in really difficult and stressful situations. How did you do that work while parenting?
It's hard and it's work. I do feel like we get initiated. For me, the way that I see it is that every challenge, every experience that was difficult for us in our life, whether it be parenting or before parenting, is that these are all opportunities. These challenges that come to us in the form of our children's behaviors or our lives not being the way that we thought they were going to be. The example I give a lot is I am a straight A student or I went to college and I got a master's degree. So my thinking is I'm going to have children. They're going to go to school. They're going to be straight A students. They're going to go to college. And what happened was that we were getting thrown out of all the schools. And there was these aggressive behaviors that no one wanted to acknowledge were nervous system reactions. And they were being looked at as an intentional act, trying to hurt other people and labeling my child as early as the first grade as someone who is assaulting people or stealing things. So there are all these things that come up in our journey that we have to navigate through that in the moment, they are hard. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. I'm not going to emotionally bypass that. There are many nights, and there's still nights now that I cry myself to sleep, that I feel the pain and I feel the hurt because it is hard because not only are we fighting against ourselves, but we're fighting against a lot of systems. But I look at those moments now as my soul being redirected. Now it's okay. This didn't work out. This is what you thought was going to be the plan. This is what you thought it was going to look like. That's not the path for you. The path for you is going to look different. So how do you find peace with that path? What changes are you being called to make within your life, within yourself, that will radically accept what is in front of you? And that is how you start the healing process from a more empowered point of view, because it is very easy to get stuck in that hurt. And in that, I say this with a lot of love, and I tell my clients this. Sometimes this is what I call tough love, but we stay in that victimhood. We want to be victims to our circumstances. We want to be victims to what is happening around us. Doesn't take away from the fact that we are living in systems that are extremely unfair, that have ingrained, indoctrinated ableism within them. All of that is playing its part. But what I realized is that I can only control what I have within me and my little bubble. How can we alchemize the challenges? You chose this life. Your soul chose this life for a reason, to learn lessons that you were going to be integrating throughout your process of evolving here during this lifetime. And so how can you turn those challenges, those setbacks, into you being rerouted to really being who you truly were meant to be and the life you were meant to live? And I thank my son for all of those hardships. I thank him, even though I was stressed out. I was like, what am I going to do? No school. And I was working full time. We had to figure out what changes needed to happen in order for us to meet his needs. And when I realized that by meeting his needs, I was meeting myself again. And so I say this to parents all the time, that parenting for me has been the most transformative experience back home to me, because I get to advocate for my child now. I have the confidence to advocate for myself. And so I want to really invite parents and moms to allow these challenges and these very difficult moments to be initiations for your soul to level up. And what does that look like for you? The biggest thing that we can do is to learn to live our lives authentically for ourselves. And that's going to trickle down to our children. The best thing that we can do is to see them for who they are. And when we see them for who they are, they teach us that we can also free ourselves. And so when you start to look at it from that angle, you start to see how the different things start aligning for you. Like now, I'm just so happy to just be home with my kiddos and not have to go to everything and be everything for everyone. Because guess what? That was just me masking. That was me pretending that I could do all these things when in reality, I was giving and not recharging myself. And so now that he has shown me that some things are just too much for him and that's not going to help him, like now I'm like, okay, the answer is no, we're not going to do that.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you are being you, because that's where my spirituality intersects as well, is that then you are being radiantly you. And there are so many ways that ripples beyond our kids. That yes, our kids need us to show up that way, but also the world needs you that way. So for our last question, I'm interested in the ways that your identity as a neurodivergent Latina therapist, mom, there's so much lived experience there, so much richness. Thinking about the way that self-healing needs to be viewed from a more intersectional lens, that sometimes self-healing is a very private inward journey, as though we're not also entangled in systems of racism and ableism and classism and trauma that are systemic. So, how do you view the interplay between self healing and transformation of everything?
I think what intersectionality has done for me is that it has reminded me to stand in my power and in my truth. I think I'm very honored to be here in this time in our lifetime, because our veils are being lifted. And I think that we're seeing the world for what it truly is. And I think for a long time growing up Latina, I was looked at as the minority group. And so that's sometimes played in how I showed up in the world, because I minimized my gifts. I minimized who I am because I felt like I was always a minority. And so I always felt like I needed to over in certain areas in order to prove myself. And the neurodivergence part, I didn't get identified as late ADHD and I self-identify as autistic until this year, right? 2023. So it's been very recent, even though I've had my inklings. And of course, because of my son's diagnosis, I started to put two and two together. I'm like, I do a lot of the things that he does. And I was this way as a kid. And but just people were just like, okay, well, whatever. So I feel like it's a gift to be able to see yourself in all the things that make you, and then be able to take that and not allow it to keep you in that box. So I think you were talking about like just nuance and complexities of growing up neurodivergent, whether you were identified or not as a child, growing up Latina. I think that there's just a lot of things that happen as they should in order for you to then fully step into the full strength and power and gift and medicine that you were meant to birth here in this lifetime in this earth. And so for me, it was like a slow process of building myself up. And those experiences, honestly, they enrich me. So like my culture, I speak two different languages. I speak Spanish and English. I grew up in New York City. So I have that culture part of me where I'm so New York, right? Like I'm from Brooklyn. I'm so proud of that always. That's always within me. So I have this about me, this kind of go-getter attitude, because that was that culture, that city hustle culture. So it's like, there's so many beautiful things that came from growing up in the Latina culture, growing up in New York City. There was also a lot of things that were traumatic, but those things, again, they overlap with the systems. Growing up in low income housing, we know that marginalized groups, they're usually not given access to things that groups that are not marginalized will have access to. And so we were put together in these little places and boxes and grew up in these areas where we didn't have enough resources. And so a lot of people turned to drugs and turned to violence, and that it was actually set up that way, that the system made it so that we were kept small. And so I really thank all of those experiences, even though a lot of them were difficult and unpleasant, but it really made the mold for the person who I am today. And that's why for me, every single moment is a gift. Every single moment is another chance for me to continue to explore deeper into who I am, and to also be a role model for others that are following in my footsteps, so that they can see that a little girl from Brooklyn, New York, a Latina, who her first language was Spanish and then learns English the hard way, to see that you don't have to just be the circumstances that you were dealt with. And that, that if you really truly have a dream and have a passion for something, that you decide you have the power to go after what it is that you want. And so you figure it out. You find the resources, you find your tribe, you find the people who are going to fan those flames for you. And that's something that I had to really look for in my own journey, is to find other women that look like me, that inspire me, that can mentor me. And so it's an ongoing process of just learning about yourself and learning what's going to help you to be the best you.
When I look at the neurodivergent community, I'm really grateful that you're identifying your ADHD and your autism and sharing what it looked like for you to be a little Latina girl in Brooklyn and autistic and ADHD, because those things are going to matter so much for our ability to identify those girls that are getting ignored or judged or shamed or mislabeled right now. And we desperately need these lived experience stories so that we know what we're seeing. We know the breadth and the depth and the lived experience of the neurodivergent community and not leaving family members out. And then so that we can change things for the next generation. So I'm so glad that you have this intersectional lived experience and that your shining light is bringing it out into a wider way in the world. Super grateful for you.
Thank you. I'm grateful to you, Amanda. I think that's one of the reasons why we connected. And I just love your authenticity, and it's inspiring. I always say to everyone that works with me, look towards the people that inspire you to what you want to become. Everyone's unique and we have our own unique soul print, but surround yourself with those people that inspire you to what you want to be, because it's doable. You can do it. And we need to be able to see that. So I appreciate those words, because I really do want to be that shining light, like beacon, right? That says, hey, we're neurodivergent and we're good. Like, we're amazing people. And you don't have to be in fear, right, of what you might have been told. Like, we are beautiful, and we add so much richness to life, and we have so many different qualities and values that really do enrich our culture, our society. So there's no shame with being autistic and being ADHD. It's just about really embracing your strengths and getting the support that you need for whatever challenges you might face, right?
Absolutely. Well, this has been an incredibly meaningful conversation and really tracks my own journey with self-healing. I really hope that for others who are feeling stuck or frustrated or lost, that this really powerful story that you've brought us today can help to rejuvenate that sense of grounded confidence and deep connection with intuition, that you have everything you need to move out of this stuck place and into a place of more ease and joy. You have it all right there inside you.
If this podcast is speaking to your soul, you can subscribe through wherever you get your own podcasts. Even better, if you feel the nudge, head on over to Apple Podcasts in particular and leave us a review. It's such a helpful way for new people to also get to experience what this podcast wants to bring into their lives. I'm Amanda. Remember, it takes great strength to let things go. I'll see you next week.